We're billing this as a casual evening with current trustee of the Rotary Foundation, Dean Roars. We have not asked her to address a specific topic. We want to hear whatever it is that's on her mind. And I'd like to tell you a little about her. She has lived a fascinating life so far, and I'd like to share some of that with you. She and her husband, Rhino, and their 3 children emigrated to Canada from South Africa 32 years ago. Dean grew up in Zambia, and after marrying Rhino, lived in Malawi, Namibia, and South Africa. Dean was born into a Rotary family, and when Rhino joined Rotary in 1986, became an active Rotary Ann until she joined Rotary herself in 1989. On arriving in Vancouver, both Dean and Rhino joined the Rotary Club of West Vancouver and at present are members of the Rotary Club of Langley Central in Districts 5050. Dean has had a varied career. From the early days of being an operating room nurse on Professor Christian Barnard's first heart transplant team to running a nursery school in Malawi. Together with Rhino, they now own and manage a company that's involved in soil stabilization during road construction. I grew up in the country with dirt roads, so I found their company information absolutely fascinating. Dean's Rotary credentials include serving on district and zone committees, which include being Regional Rotary Coordinator and Regional Rotary Foundation Coordinator, Pacific Northwest PETS Chair, District Governor in 2007 and 8, Rotary International Director from 2016 to 18, Rotary International Vice President 2017 and 18, President of the Rotary Foundation Canada right now, and Trustee of the Rotary Foundation 2020 to 2023. However, Dean sees her best experience as leading teams of Rotarians, Rotaractors, and Interactors to Africa and seeing how this volunteer experience changes their lives. You may have questions for Dean. Please put your questions in the chat and we will do our very best to answer as many as possible. And now please join me in welcoming Rotary International Foundation Trustee, Dean Roars.
Thank you, Charlene. And gosh, Charlene and Mark, thank you so much for this opportunity of spending a little time with you. As you can see, I'm wearing my hard hat. And it was because I have been in some pretty hard-hitting Rotary meetings today, but I'm now with friends, so I think I can remove it safely because I don't think you're going to throw anything at me. Before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge all those on this meeting here this evening. I'll do it the African way. All protocols observed, because if I was to try and find the names amongst the pictures, I will probably lose somebody and upset somebody somewhere along the way. So it was an interesting thing to suddenly be asked to be presenting to you, not having the opportunity to really investigate and get to know you as well as I should do. I have visited your districts. I have spent time with your Rotarians, but it's been some years back. So in going through that, I thought to myself about what's happening around us today. We're also terribly cognizant of COVID. We're also terribly aware of what has happened in the world. And we are all really, we're bending and we're flexing with what COVID has put us through. And our thoughts and our prayers are actually with every single one of those Rotarians right across the world that are being so heavily impacted as we speak. We think of our fellow Rotarians in India, in Brazil, and of those countries that are having such a difficult time. But we have hope. We have hope where we are. We've been through this, the dark, dark side of it, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And slowly, slowly, we're coming back to our Rotary, the Rotary that we knew, but it's going to be a changed Rotary. It will never be exactly the same again. But there is an essence, there is a core of Rotary that will never change. And I thought I would just talk about those just very briefly tonight as a reminder of why are we Rotarians? Why are we doing what we do? Why did we go through COVID in the way that we did and still stay energized and passionate about Rotary? And it comes down, in my mind, to the core values of what is represented in Rotary and what Rotary stands for. There are 5 core values, and they are service, fellowship, diversity, integrity, and leadership. So let's look at them just a little bit more closely. Service. We believe that peace comes from understanding our world, which is a byproduct of service activities and our programs. And service is one of the main elements of our mission and the initiatives we pursue within each of our individual clubs, which fuels our culture. There's no greater satisfaction than that which comes from serving others. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" It's not something we start our day with. I don't get up in the morning and say to myself, okay, so what am I going to do for others today? But as Rotarians, I would almost guarantee that not a single day goes by that we don't actually do something for somebody. I know for myself, I fell into service just because I grew up around Rotary, because I was voluntold by my Rotary parents into every single volunteer opportunity that they ever served under. And I must admit, I really hated Rotary until Rotary pushed my service button. My most precious Rotary memories are those times when I was able to be service to a community in need. So let me share one of these with you. A few years ago, I was on a polio national immunization trip in northern Nigeria, a truly unforgettable experience. And Mike McGovern will totally relate with what I'm going to tell you now. On this particular day, the team was broken up and each small group dropped off at a very remote small village or a family compound in the middle of nowhere. So together with a Rotarian from Quebec and a local Rotaractor who acted as our translator, and of course the 5 members of the vaccination team, we were deposited under the shade tree amongst the chili fields on the outside of a very small village made up of family compounds. And as I watched our transportation disappear into the distance, I really didn't know if I would ever be found again. And that morning, the women would appear from behind the homes and from across the fields, bringing their children and babies to be vaccinated. We were closely guarded by this wonderful old village headman, and he had no teeth, and he kept bringing us ground nuts or peanuts that he dug up from the field next to us. And at lunch, his wife, who I truly believe was at least 100 years old, brought us a very special dish she had prepared just for the 2 North Americans. Strange as it was, we hunched down on the ground and shared a meal using our fingers to lift the food to our mouths. And we smiled and we oohed and we ahed and made sounds of deliciousness with no idea what this was that we were eating or if we would medically survive the experience. And in fact, neither of us suffered any dire consequences except a huge dose of indigestion and never knowing what the stew was made up of. But by the early afternoon, the women and children stopped coming. So I asked our wonderful guardian if we could walk through the village and see if we could find children that had not been immunized. Now, this is a Muslim community, so being women, we were allowed into the family compounds. And indeed, we did find children that had not been vaccinated. However, what the story is leading to is that in wandering through the compounds, we came across a well, just an old-fashioned open well with a very low brick surround. And there were 6 young girls aged about 11 to 12, pulling up the water in a bucket on a rope and then filling their buckets. They were chattering away and they shyly greeted and smiled at us. And you know how those African children always smile behind their hands like this. And when they all had their buckets full, they lifted them up onto their heads and disappeared into the bushes along a little dusty path. I asked our guardian, where are they going? And he explained that there was another small village about 3 kilometers down the road, which had no well, and that these little girls were the water carriers doing this journey twice a day, every day. I will never forget those little girls, their strong little backs balancing those sloshing buckets of water on their heads, those little brave feet, taking them so bravely along that little dusty path. And remember, this is Boko Haram country. I'll never forget knowing what life held for them, how little hope they had to lift themselves out of the bondage of being born in their community to subsistence farmers. Now, when we got back to the hotel that night, got back to the tree, I asked our translator to find out more about the villages around that area and the water situation. And the reality was that there were two little villages close to the one that we were at, and neither of them had a well. So casually I asked what it took to dig a simple well. How much did this cost? And that night, as I sat on my bed in my hotel, I took out my little bit of spending money. I took out my small emergency travel fund and I laid those dollar bills on the bed. And I found that I had enough funds not only to rehabilitate that well, but to dig 2 more wells. It takes so little to change lives. And that trip, as I handed over the funds to the Rotaractors to complete the project of getting the Canadian wells dug in northern Nigeria, it not only changed those villagers' lives, but it really, really changed mine so well. That is service. Service goes both ways. It goes both out and it goes in. Our second core value is fellowship. How have we suffered around what we thought we always would be doing in Rotary? Our close connections with our fellow Rotarians, our events where we came together, standing side by side as we worked with projects, being with our communities during this COVID time. It has really made us value what fellowship is really about. We believe that grouped efforts combine to benefit all of humanity. Strength in numbers provides more access to resources and expands our overall perspective of the world. Fellowship generates greater tolerance of others, and it transcends all boundaries, including those of race, gender, and nationality. You may have already heard me saying these words from an African saying, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. The glue that binds our clubs together is the friendship and fellowship that we develop with our club mates, other Rotarians that join us on projects, the youth exchange students we host, and all those amazing people we get to know through Rotary. What is Rotary without fun and fellowship? It sustains us even in difficult times. Your Rotary friends become your Rotary family. And this has been proved through and through over these last 16 months. The next core value is diversity, which you're pretty familiar with, seeing that you have instituted your DEI committees and that you are focusing on this new part of Rotary. Because we believe that in the pursuit of service to others, we can accomplish international unity. Through the diversity of our members, our organization is able to broaden the scope of the activities, programs, and service that we can provide. We encourage a diverse community within the individual clubs that are a part of Rotary International. And every club should reflect diversity of the community that it serves. Can you really say that your club is representative of everyone? Age, gender, ethnicity, professions, backgrounds, educational levels? And it saddens me greatly when I visit a club and all I see are white men and women, when I know that there's a vibrant ethnic community outside that club's doors. I come from Vancouver, where every single resident is an immigrant, yet so many of our clubs remain attached to that Caucasian image. We are now having a reaction. We are starting to form ethnic-based clubs to address this. In Vancouver, we now have a Mandarin-speaking club, a Chinese businessmen and women's club, a Korean-speaking club, a Filipino community club, which chartered with over 80 members. And I think that this tells us These communities are ready to join Rotary, and if we do not invite them into our clubs, they'll go out and charter their own. So this brings us to integrity, accountability, honesty, and ethics are the backbone of our organization and something we expect from each one of our leaders and our members. We encourage all members to adhere to the highest standard in both professional and personal relationships with others. Fairness and respect are grounded in the four-way test, and we must conscientiously steward the resources entrusted to us. But you know, when I think about integrity, I'm reminded of the director for a special needs school in Central Siberia. One does not often put the two words integrity and Russia together in a sentence, but in this case, it is truly applicable. The special needs school is a boarding school for 117 boys and girls with no parents or family and with special needs. They are blind, they are deaf, they are mentally challenged and have physical abnormalities. It's a state-run institution with outstanding facilities to deal with all the needs of these children. And they cater for ages from 7 to 19 when they leave for the outside world with skills that will enable them to become contributing citizens. These children rarely see the inside of a normal family home and never experience family life. So the director of the institution, at her own cost, has funded a family-style kitchen and a dining room, furnished with home-style equipment, with pictures, with flowers, and all the little knickknacks that we have in a normal home. And when the girls reach the last 2 years of school residency, they are given the opportunity to spend time with the director in this little kitchen and cook family-style meals, to interact with each other in a family way, and just get the feel of what it is like to be in a family kitchen with friends and family and serve and eat a meal in a social environment. As the director told me, we give them all the support they need physically and educationally, but we cannot replace what they have lost as never being part of a family. How will these girls know how to support their own little families when they marry and have their children? And she said, the only gift that I can give them is to help them understand the love of a family and its home. And I must admit that the two of us shared a tear over a good cup of Russian chai and Russian pastries. Now, finally, there is leadership. We believe in the development and nurturing of current and future leaders in our community. As a global fellowship, we hold leadership qualities in the highest regard amongst Rotarians as we strive to implement our core values throughout the world. And this reminds me of a young girl from impossible circumstances who is now a leader in her community. Her name is Elizabeth, and I met Elizabeth more than 15 years ago. We were in one of the informal settlements just outside of Johannesburg, a place of utter darkness. More than 1 million people living in abject poverty, no education, no ability to reach education, no ability to take that first step up on the economic ladder to self-independence. And while walking around with the social workers from the area and Rotarians, I was confronted by a young girl who came running up. She's about 14 years old, and she had this brand new baby, about a week old, in her hands. And she thrust the baby at me and she said to me, "Take my baby and make him yours." And I said to her, "Why would you give me your baby?" And she said to me, "I'm 14 years old. I have no education. I'm HIV positive because I am a prostitute. What hope is there for my child?" Well, the social workers, the Rotarians stepped up. They scooped her up. They took her to an organization where she was introduced into a family as an adopted child. She was fostered. She was cared for. Through Rotary, she was given the opportunity for education. But she showed leadership. She showed the leadership that was needed to make that first initial decision that she didn't have the capability to raise a child in a manner that the child deserved. She grasped every opportunity that came her way. She is now working for the government of South Africa, leading a social worker program dealing with all the unfound orphans that they have in their communities. She is a leader in more ways than one. She is taking her community to somewhere else. We hope that as you reflect on these core values and you use them to guide your daily life, along with the four-way test, we hope to inspire you towards the ideal of service above self and developing integrity in all of your interactions. You have the opportunity, as we now rejoin the world in our new way, of moving further and stronger than we ever have been able to do. And as you know, I often end my presentations with a quote from Nelson Mandela. And he said, "Overcoming poverty is not a task of charity. It is an act of justice. Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made and can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. Sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. You can be that great generation. Let your greatness blossom." So as we step into our new bright future, as we celebrate together at this conference, let our greatness blossom. Thank you, everybody.